Hi everybody, welcome to this session, to this lively discussion, and I feel like if it's going to be lively because we've already had some discussions about other competitive conferences like ERA now. So let's see if we can keep that going, even though the room is quite dispersed, but hopefully it'll work fine. I'm going to let all of the panelists introduce themselves as we go. What we wanted to do was just have 5 minutes where we're kind of setting up what our story is, from where we come from, and how we're approaching the question that's being put here about making the most of the library, but also talking about affordability and ways in which the library is heavily engaged in that. Where are you going with that? What kind of challenges are you experiencing, etc. So we'll each talk 5 minutes, and then we'll open up for a wider discussion, and we're going to have Charles kick us off.
Okay, great, thanks. I've been in this room before. If it can get noisy out in the hall there, so feel free to just shut the door if you think it gets distracting or whatever. I see most people going. Thanks. So all right, we're going to go 5 minutes each, and then we're going to have a lively discussion. So I'm Charles Lyons. I'm the library director at Buffalo State College, which is the largest comprehensive or four-year college in the SUNY system. If I could just pause for a moment and brag about my hometown a little bit, because I know what you're probably thinking. I just want you all to know there's no snow on the ground right now in Buffalo, although it is cold enough, and it is in the forecast for this afternoon. So I don't know what I'll be going back to. So let's see here. This is me right here. So it's only 5 minutes. I may just spend the whole time on this one particular slide, maybe get through one or two of them. But what I thought I would start out with is talking about our approach to affordability overall, and not just talk about encouraging the use of library resources and deeper integration of library resources into the curriculum. We'll get to that afterwards, as long as I don't talk too much. So at Buffalo State College, we have a campus-wide affordable learning materials initiative. And of course, this is higher ed, so we have a Affordable Learning Materials Initiative Committee. I'm the chair of it by default, but it is really campus-wide. So there are a few library folks on it. There's the registrar on there. There are a few faculty members on there. The LMS administrator is on there. Instructional designer is on there. So it really is brings all different perspectives to this idea of affordability. And really, we're again focused on these three main areas. And maybe this is not new to anyone, but this really just sort of evolved over the course of the past year. I've only been at Buff State for the past year or so, but initially we were really mostly just focused, in terms of affordability, on OER, on the top one there. That was driven by a very practical reason, is that there was a big carrot there. And New York is one of the states that's at the forefront of providing funding to support OER. And for the past 3 years, New York State has provided SUNY, which is the State University of New York, and CUNY, City University of New York, with $8 million to the campuses to incentivize OER. That was a pretty big motivator, and much of our meetings and time so far has been spent on OER, doing a lot of the same stuff that is being talked about at this conference, and I'm sure that many of you all are doing, providing stipends and awards and grants to faculty members to adopt and create OER, spending money on professional development for librarians and faculty to learn about OER. We've spent some money on some products that facilitate the adoption of OER. The big one for us is Lumen Learning. So we have a statewide agreement with Lumen Learning to provide it at each of the 64 campuses in the SUNY system, and things like that, membership in Spark and so on. So that's really how it started. But over the course of the past year, we sort of, the lens has broadened a little bit. And we started to talk a lot more about, I was going to say the bad guys, but the commercial publishers in the textbook space and some of the newer business models that they're offering. And one of the reasons why this came about was that our textbook, we're a Barnes & Noble campus, our textbook, our bookstore contract was up for renewal. And so the ALMI, the committee, was the group that reviewed the contracts that came in that were bidding for the new business. And we ended up sticking with Barnes & Noble, but one of the things that they proposed was a few different variations of inclusive access and day one type programs. Are really, I'm sure all of you are the same way, of two minds about them using this term inclusive access, because it makes it sound so noble. And really what these are just automatic purchasing programs, right? Where students, if they enroll in a class, for example, have to, in order to enroll, are assessed a fee that automatically purchases the learning materials for that course. And the big one for us, through Barnes & Noble, and I think they only have 2 campuses that are doing this so far, was they proposed a program where every single student on campus would pay a fee at the start of the semester, and they would all get their learning materials for the semester, print or electronic. A flat fee that all students would pay at the beginning of a semester to get access to all of their learning materials. So this sparked a lot of conversation on the campus about how we felt about this, and the pros and cons of it, and also how it fits in with these other areas here. So if we were to do sort of this day one or inclusive access campus-wide, well, what motivation would faculty have really to go with OER? You know, because we know it's a lot of work to create OER and adopt OER. Would those 2 initiatives sort of fly in the face of each other, or is this a big enough space where we could do both and they could be resonant with each other, and so forth. So, and then the third area we've been focusing on is on encouraging the use of library resources. So I've been here at Buff State for 1 year. Before that, I was at a large research-intensive university, and I think this is fairly common, is at Buff State and at UB, where a portion of our collections budget is paid for by the fees that students pay. Right? I think I see some heads nodding, right? So at the place where I was before, it was University at Buffalo, I think almost 50% of our collections budget was funded by student fees. Where I am now at Buff State, which is a smaller school, 8,000 students, more focused on teaching, we're about 70% funded by the fees that students pay. Tech fee, comprehensive fee, whatever you want to call it. So, so that was a really big motivator for us. Like, we would meet once a year with students. All the areas on campus that receive fees would meet with students once a semester to sort of share information about how we're spending that money. And at that meeting, in the library, we were always hard-pressed to explain to students how their money was being used to benefit them, because most of the money was going to support research and going to support faculty. You know, and so we would really have to scratch our heads and dig pretty deep to rationalize or justify the money that we were spending to students. I mean, grad students was a little easier, right? But I mean, an undergraduate learning that we spend $1 million on Elsevier, they would think, well, that's not really that relevant to me, you know? So, so that was a pretty big motivator for us. And we also wanted to find out if there were teachers, faculty, instructors using learning resources in their classes that were already available in the library, you know, and they were sort of paying twice. We haven't really come across too much of this. It's one of the big things you hear about when, as a motivator to pursue these sorts of initiatives. We have had more success on just licensing resources through the library on behalf of faculty so that they could adopt them in the class. We haven't found too much double counting. So, oh my God, I'm already red. I'm on the first slide. I'll just do a few more stories. So I was going to focus more on the use of library resources, and we can talk more about it in the discussion session. So I'll just tell two quick stories, I guess, maybe about faculty using library resources. One was a faculty member using philosophy, did a ton of work, knocked off his textbook. His philosophy probably wasn't that expensive, but he created his course all around using library resources. It's a success story. But before the semester started, the campus rolled out this new tool. We use Blackboard, learning management system called Blackboard. And they have this tool called Ally, which identifies automatically which resources in Blackboard are not accessible. And so he adopted all these resources, was teaching with them. We turned on Ally before the start of the semester, and all these red lights came up. A lot of JSTOR articles and things like this, as the articles weren't being accessible. So just sort of a lesson learned from us to factor that into the whole process when we're working with faculty. Then one other thing I'll just say is that we also had a faculty member doing the same thing, who was working on adopting, integrating library resources into his course. And he was thinking all along that he would, by doing that, would qualify for the OER funding. But when you split the hairs and you look at it closely, using library resources is not really OER. And so our OER funding comes from the state, and there's sorts of regulations that are put upon it. So we had a really disappointed faculty member who did a lot of work, and it was great that he was using library resources in his course, but was not able to qualify for this funding that many of his peers were getting for using OER. So another lesson learned, I guess. All right, I didn't get to even a quarter of the stuff I wanted to, but we'll stop there, and I'll hand it off to Anaya.
Thank you. I only have one side, so there we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Danai Jones. I'm with Southern New Hampshire University. And we have an interesting model at SNU. We definitely have a commitment to affordability. I think that comes through in the way that we design our online coursework. Paul LeBlanc, our president, sort of off the cuff during one of the commencement speeches once said, the world in which we live equally distributes talent, but it does not equally distribute opportunity. And that's one of the, it's kind of funny, we'll have them on little plaques outside of our meeting rooms across SNU, and that's one of the ones that's really stuck with me. And we really see that in how we're designing our coursework, how we're sourcing those materials, and you'll hear people asking, like, is this what's good for the student? And we actually do ask that question and try to answer it. So we're set up a little bit differently in that we don't have, on our traditional campus, we have faculty members who are designing their courses and then presenting that material to students. But at Global Campus, or our massive online, they're all built by teams of instructional designers working with content architects that put that content into Brightspace, our LMS, and they're working with subject matter experts in order to source that content. So it's a little bit different than what a lot of people are doing. And we've experimented with inclusive access. We are definitely using OER and encouraging our SMEs and instructional designers to use that content. But we've also tried to make it as easy as possible for those teams that are building course content to utilize the library resources in those classes. And my e-learning colleagues and I, there's a team of 3 of us for all of our programs, try to support that as much as possible. So we do trainings for those teams on how to get the most out of library resources, how to create deep links that are sustainable and then continue to work, because that can be a problem. As well as looking at the licensing of different programs, or different vendor offerings so that we're matching our IDs with the content that's going to be the most stable over time. Before I was with Southern New Hampshire University, I was with a small private university in Virginia, Mary Baldwin University. And I say that only to highlight the differences in the ways that doing this sourcing of library content and using it in classes can differ drastically depending on where you are, but I think it's still worth looking into it. So we would, at Mary Baldwin, we would encourage faculty who were designing their courses to utilize library content, but pretty much if we had it, we were encouraging them to use it. Because whatever our licenses were, the likelihood that students were going to run into a block that said, this has been checked out too many times, was low enough to not be a massive risk, right? It was worth the small risk of that happening to encourage that use of library content, to reduce costs to students, and also to see our students in our resources more. At SNHU, where we're talking about 130,000 learners, not all in the same course, but still, you can imagine, it's exceptionally important for us to be looking only at licenses that allow for unlimited users at once, because I can buy three user licenses for hundreds of dollars and still not meet the needs of my students. And also for that content to be purchased as much as possible and not in a subscription model where the content might be pulled later. Because when we have multiple teams, and we have something like 5 or 6 teams in active development currently, and then we're kicking off 8 more this January. So we're talking about a lot of people sourcing a lot of content for a lot of different classes. When they embed that library content into Brightspace, and then something gets pulled out of a list, we'll get these massive title change lists from our vendors saying like, well, this was in your subscription content, and now it's not. We don't always have a good way to be like, okay, well, I know that content was used in these courses, and I'm going to go update that content, or I'm going to find another piece of resource that fills that need so that I don't have broken links and students not being able to find what they're looking for. So instead, a lot of times what we find out, or how we find out that content is no longer available or that it was used in a course, is when we are finding those broken links in courses. So one of the biggest challenges that we're looking at coming up is how do we track what our designers are using in their courses so that we can make some of those changes and substitutions and we're not finding it after it's already become a problem.
And now that's a problem that only somebody of our scale is probably going to have, because a couple of years ago at my small university in Virginia, that wasn't even on our radar, right? But that's one of the things that we're thinking about. There are some barriers to using library resources in courses. Students have a hard time with navigating multiple different systems, and the steps to getting to the full text can be different in different systems. So I think there's definitely some interesting ways to talk about that there. But overall, we're really happy to be able to offer that resource to our designers for our students, because it does reduce their costs substantially. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. So, hi everyone. So I'm Karen Schumann, and I'm going to be representing Thales. I'm going to be talking from a position of a vendor, which is Thales, that is in existence in the UK and in Australia and in Northern Europe, and we're very interested in conversations about the North American market. And one of the things that Thales is particularly good at doing in the markets that it's already quite entrenched in is helping with that question of moving what might currently in some institutions be quite a blurry existence of the teaching faculty that sort of exists outside of the library. That library doesn't have that much ability to sort of really get into the detail of how the teaching faculty is practicing, how they're using resources within their courses, into an environment where that blurriness goes away, and where with good intelligence tools and excellent kind of workflows, the library really can have stronger visibility over what faculty are using in courses, and in that way, one of the things that can be done is to help make the most of library resources. In other words, quite close to what Anaya was saying, to really bring out the ways in which learning resources in the library can already be helpful. But to do that in a way which really sort of offers a glue across the very many integration points that exist in the library. So on the one hand, we have the library system, but then we also know that the students can be found in the learning management system. And what Thales has been doing in its markets is really enabling the connectivity across all of these different, let's say, vendors or systems that are already being used, and make them work even harder to be able to deliver up the content in a way that the student can experience it, the faculty member can experience it through what is called a course resource management software. One of the things I think I just wanted to sort of mention very quickly is that they have already been very successful. These are examples of customers who are already using Thales Aspire, and it's a range of different kinds of institutions, kinds of universities, and it's proven itself over the many years that it's been in existence to be really robust and flexible, with a 99.999% uptime. So strong and proven software as a service that's looking at how it can help with the library to deliver better learning experiences, and to use software to do that. And one of the things that we are really interested in probing as Thales looks at sort of customers in North America is the extent to which learning affordability is a key issue that Thales Aspire, as an example, could really help with. And so these are some of the ways in which we see that software being able to be helpful. Something that is able to really help existing libraries, help faculty to sort of choose resources that's already in the library, and so to really show it up to them. But also there could be a pricing issue around that, where students and faculty can see how much money they could be saving for their students if they're choosing resources that already exist, or choosing resources that the students don't have to go and buy, or even there's a price comparability. It can be linking with bookshops, it can be linking with the availability in the library, and tell the student the kind of information that they might need to know about how important it is that they get access to this content if it's not in the library. Also using copyright clearance, and so that the library system can be tied in with the fair use and show compliance, so that requests for permission can just be automated, and again the student gets access to that information. And a big question for us is how valuable is measurement? If we can give examples of where the librarian and the faculty member as well can really measure their success, So they can report back out on whether students have saved any money and whether departments as a whole have saved any money. But also they can report back out on the extent to which OER resources are being chosen and being used. And that could help in terms of the conversations about if the university has a strategy or the library has a strategy about really pushing the use of OER, as we heard right at the beginning, then this system could be a useful way of reporting back out on whether that's actually happening with the faculty. Because all of the reading lists or the resource lists come through back up to the library for them to be able to see what's being used. And so in conclusion, looking at using resource management systems such as Thales Aspire to really give you the tools to measure what exactly is going on in your institution, looking to implement policy changes, but having scalable workflows that help you to be able to make that change, and really being able to measure the impact and report back out on it. So that's from me. And now hand over to Stina.
Hey, I'm Austina Jordan, and before October the 1st, I was collection management librarian, but I've since switched positions, so I'm now head of access services at the University of North Georgia, which is a consolidated university. And is anybody from the state of Georgia in here? A couple people. All right, do you guys work for USG schools? Yes, which one?
ASU.
Okay, so Georgia's interesting. It's been going through consolidations for the last almost 10 years, for better or for worse. And so UNG is one of those. We consolidated 6 years ago. And so we have 5 campuses. We have an enrollment of just under 20,000 students. But what I'm really going to talk about is about Affordable Learning Georgia, which is an initiative that started in 2013. I'm by no means an expert about ALG, but I think it's an important initiative in the state with the notion that, college education isn't cheap, and that we're trying to find ways to reduce those costs for our students in the state. And so the 26 institutions came together under the umbrella of the USG in 2013 and came up with Digital Learning Georgia. And there's a variety of initiatives that have come out of that. And the 4 main goals of ALG are awarding textbook transformation grants, which allows faculty and librarians and instructional designers on campus to take existing content and to transform and improve it. And so our projects aren't necessarily just exclusively about OER, but it's about OER and no or low cost resources, recognizing, because even I was reading a survey that they did last year and they kept talking about no cost library resources. I'm like, well, that's not really true. They do ultimately cost something. It's just the students not necessarily incurring that fee after they've paid tuition. So I think sometimes that's important to make sure people know that those things aren't really free. There are costs associated with it. And then the University Press from North Georgia, we serve as a hosting press for OER textbooks that don't already exist, or if people want to write new textbooks. The press at UNG works with authors across the state who get these grants and want to publish new textbooks or revise them. And so then they get hosted on our University VPress site for download. And it's pretty interesting to kind of look and see where those textbooks are used across the country and the world. The librarian who hosts that in our facilities, she always gets excited when stuff from other countries shows up on her radar. And she, you're wondering, like, why did one person in India download that book yesterday? Like, what's going on there? But and then also working to making sure that things are not just in the UNG vPress, but that they're also in the statewide repository, so that things have multiple avenues of access. And then every campus across the USG has these 2 roles that are important: the campus champions and the library coordinators. And so those are sort of the spokespeople for the project for Affordable Learning Georgia. And those roles rotate, different people volunteer for it, and I think it's an important initiative. And another thing that's recently happened in the state of Georgia in 2018, our legislatures like to make rules and implement things. If you work for state institutions, you wonder sometimes, like, what was their thinking behind this? But they say it, and it is so, and you must do it, right? And so in 2018, the legislature said that we needed to start indicating, it's called a course catalog designator. So students can actually search for courses based solely on if it's a no-cost textbook course or if it's a low-cost, and the low-cost option is, it has to be under $40. So, you know, those are the two things, and it's interesting, I've gone in there periodically to kind of look and see. So there are some students who will choose a course over another one simply because there's no, you know, there's no cost associated with it. And so the other thing too is that they work making sure that all the campuses that the faculty know and understand the resources that are available to them. So the USG uses Brightspace's Desire to Learn D2L, and currently they use EBSCO's curriculum builder to help students, because I always am, when a student says like I can't get this or I got this PDF, I'm like, where did you get the PDF? Or, oh, my professor emailed it to me, and I'm like, well, I didn't hear you say that, did I? Because you know, and helping to educate professors about how, you know, we spend a lot of money. We know how much we spend on these resources. They're not inexpensive. And making sure that then in turn that the people who authored those things are, that they're, you know, they're getting the credit for all those downloads that are happening. And so they provided some really good tutorials to help educate professors about what it looks like to really make sure your students are accessing these things legally and appropriately. Because if you know anything about the state of Georgia, Georgia State really got us in the press a few years ago with the course reserves, and you know, so we all sort of like, are we doing this correctly, and you know, making sure that we're working effectively in those avenues. So I think Affordable Learning Georgia has some really great initiatives. One last thing before I'm going to run now too. The state of Georgia has a program called eCore, which is a student who, at any USG course, any USG school can take the core class online. So the entire core for the state of Georgia is available in the online environment. And all of those classes are now all fully OER. And it's been interesting. This year I'm working as a librarian, as an adjunct librarian for eCore, and it's been a very eye-opening experience to see kind of what it looks like for students to engage with librarians and resources in that environment. And I think come December I'll have some maybe feedback for the folks who are in charge about what's working and what's not really working. So.
Great. All right, excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
So we sort of done a really quick dive into the kinds of stuff that we can talk about and are interested in, but we'd really love to hear what your experiences are and what your what kind of ways anything that has been said resonates with what you're interested in terms of the questions that we've been going through.
My name is Robert Heaton. I'm at Utah State University. We've got an active campus-wide OER committee, and that we've been involved in. That's been really positive overall. I understand our campus bookstore is also represented on the committee and is generally pretty frustrated because they have a clear directive to make money for the university. And my understanding is that for years that it's shifted to the campus store model because we don't make money off bookstores and students don't buy their books here anyway and that kind of thing. But one way or another, there's that kind of tension. And I feel like overall our mission is kind of transparency and let the professors decide what materials will best meet their needs and, you know, get input from the students on how important affordability is and that kind of thing. But I just wonder if there's any other strategies for negotiating that tension and working together. But at this point, it's kind of we each do our own thing and then try to kind of share information and let the people decide through the kind of competition. I don't know.
Right. Well, I could just say, and you probably know this already, it's cold comfort. You're not alone. Like, you know, dealing with bookstores, it seems to even just depend on the manager that you happen to have, right? Whether it's Barnes & Noble or Follett, it doesn't. You can't just generalize, I guess, in my experience. I've been on campuses with both. And so I think maybe what you're getting at is that the campus actually makes revenue off of every sale that occurs through the bookstore, and how does that create a tension if we're trying to promote free resources where no revenue would be generated for the campus? Those are conflicting goals, right? I guess we haven't drilled down to that level yet. So, yeah. Well,
So we can, I mean, in the back.
Oh.
Do you want to
I
answer
just
that
got
one?
this.
Sure.
Sure.
I'm Susan Berkman, I'm with Nova Southeastern University. So we have Barnes & Noble as our bookstore as well, and we were changing our collection development policy a few years to include textbooks. We used to not be able to buy textbooks at all. I mean, some selectors did, on the slide, but it was not a policy. So we changed it that we could, but we brought them to the table. We had them be part of that discussion, and they were actually very supportive. Because there's just so many ways they can get textbooks, and they didn't really feel that we were gonna put them out of business if we bought an electronic version or even one copy to keep on reserve or anything, and so it just worked out really nicely. In fact, they actually partnered with us in presenting something about that, so I think, you can make it work.
And I had a similar experience at Upstate where the bookstore has been very, maybe they feel like they're fighting for their very livelihood, but they've been collaborative and open and sharing the lists of courses, textbooks that are adopted. And we've even done one of those campuses where they will put a spot on the bookshelf that says this course, where you go to get the book for the course and it just says this course is using an OER. So they've been pretty open about promoting that and helping us with that. So I guess it just depends from bookstore to bookstore. Yeah. Was there a question in the back of that?
I was actually going to switch gears and talk about curriculum builder a little bit more. And has Georgia recently migrated to Alma?
Yeah, so I think all the USG schools have completed. I think the technical schools are in that process right now, but yeah,
So the question that I had for you is, at College of Charleston, the South Carolina Consortium is also going to migrate to Alma Primo. We are currently also using curriculum builder in D2L. We haven't had a lot of success getting the faculty to use it because it's in such a weird spot. It's under external tools or something.
Yeah.
It's just not integrated enough into D2L for the faculty to ever see it and do it. And we've asked Alma Primo to give us, Ex Libris, to give us demos of Leganto, which is their curriculum builder type product, but they keep showing it to us in Canvas. Have you ever seen it work in D2L?
I haven't, no, and at
Me
this
neither.
point, so just the other day, somebody asked a question on listserv, and I forwarded it on to one of our instructional designers, because she's really well versed, and I think a lot of it is, on our campus at least, from my experience in seeing it with Curriculum Builder, it's really the instructional designers who work really closely and go in, and there's a phrase they use where like somebody goes into the course and make quality matters or something, where they go through it and they make sure things are done according to a particular standard and rubric and give feedback on stuff. And so for us, it's really just been like the outreach of the department's called DEDI, I don't even know what that stands for. That those folks really are kind of the foot soldiers in making sure faculty know that stuff is out there, and it's all, because you're right, I mean, you can tell them it's there. It's like, even in my experience in using D2L with these e-course students, it doesn't matter what course you're in, there's a tab right there for Galileo in the library, and they still are like, where am I supposed to go to find things? It's right there, but they don't see it. And so it's this kind of, it's like no matter how many bells and whistles, there's still this struggle of helping students read the landscape of a screen.
And Legato looks great in Canvas, but we're D2L campus and I still haven't seen it work yet.
Yeah,
So our team's willing to buy it, but
But
I can't find a working version of it to look at.
in your platform, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't had any demos with that, because all that Georgia is kind of maybe, it's helpful that we're collaborative, but like we don't have a lot of say-so. Like the state, like you have to use D2L if you're a USG institution, you have no choice. So there's some faculty who will use it, and there's those others who still have those weird shared files from the late 90s on the campus drive that the freshmen are like, where is this file folder I'm supposed to access? And so you always have those people who resist no matter what.
Yeah, no, we have a mandate, they have to have all their core stuff in D2L.
I wish we did.
Yeah. But there's none of that going on.
And maybe we do, and they just have a slide that says this is where you go. And that's their workaround.
Can I ask you guys a question, something that Charles mentioned about the two initiatives of OER and IA can sometimes clash with each other. Does that feel like it resonates with your experiences of pushing OER or having to choose
OER versus,
inclusive access?
Commercial publishers in general, I guess.
I think it, while you all ponder, I think it can depend on how that inclusive access is put into place, because we're seeing a lot of publishers, which I think is what you were talking about before, the publishers putting forth that idea of inclusive access. When I said that Sue considered doing some inclusive access content, that was us doing that for our students and working with vendors, so that we've been using some OER in addition to those inclusive access models. And so I think in some cases there can be a tension, absolutely, but depending on how you go about it, maybe not.
I don't know about all of your campuses, but there does seem to be this deep-seated resentment towards the corporatization of higher education. And maybe it gets overblown sometimes, and maybe just the squeakiest, loudest wheels are the ones that get the attention. But often in our meetings on my campus at Buffalo State College, when we talk about it, there's this real, like, we don't want to encourage these commercial publishers to more deeply integrate into the classroom. They're already, they want to get in there, they want to get our data. No one would really say that it's threatening their job, but it's probably underlying it as well, you know, where these corporations would just create the course materials and a teacher would be forced to just use those materials that were created by a corporation. So that's just my own personal experience at Buff State, is that there's real resistance. Even, so I mentioned for OER, we have we use some of the money that we got to do a partnership with Lumen Learning. And there was even some questioning of that. Because Lumen is a corporation, right? They're actually not a nonprofit. They're a business, right? And someone was asking, why would we contract with them? It sort of flies in the face of open, you know, and it flies in the face of academy-owned, not scholarship, but academy-owned teaching and instruction, and that they know how to do it best, and they don't necessarily want anyone infringing on that. So that's where I was sort of getting at with my own experiences. Yeah.
Tracy Tanner, new to the industry here in library. But I'm just curious, of the three different approaches that you're taking to affordability, and OER, the inclusive access, and library resources, are you seeing any preference from a student's perspective, the student experience, the outcomes?
Right.
Are you seeing any differences between the three different avenues of
Right.
affordability?
So certainly not a big enough sample size, and we haven't done, you know, any like in-depth research on it. But I think what you're getting at is, so if we were to look at these three buckets and via different lenses, one would be like usability, ease of use for students, I just, I don't know, I know this is a challenge with OER, and I would think it's a challenge also with library resources. So like if a student were to go in and just, what is the textbook for my class? Let's say a professor is using library resources integrated in Blackboard or Canvas or whatever it might be. Like, I just think that the packaging provided by commercial publishers, you know, they've done a lot of the research on this. They do a lot of user research experience. They package things nicely and neatly together. They have integrated adaptive learning, and there's all sorts of bells and whistles about, you know, hey, I see you're struggling with this assignment or something, or you can automatically just hit a button and push out a kudos to a student. Like all that sort of functionality isn't really there if you're just creating a bunch of links in your learning management system, you know? So I would think that would contribute to the usability, if not from the student perspective, just from an effective teaching perspective, you know? So I think that's one of the big challenges, and also just usability from the professor's perspective as well, right? It's just so tempting. A commercial publisher, they package it all together nicely. It includes homework assignments,
Test banks, it grades your tests for you, yeah.
Supplementals is a huge issue in all of this, right? So if we look at those three buckets, OER, library resources, and commercial, like commercials are the ones that have the strongest in the supplemental materials, which is important for many courses, not all of them, but for many of them. That's a big advantage. Lumen is focusing on that with OER, but it's still a work in progress. So.
I was gonna say the ease of use thing, you know, the thing is, I've noticed, you know, at the beginning of the semester, you get these students who have been assigned OER textbooks to use, and what do they do at the beginning of the year when they get these nice big fat PDFs? They come to the library and they print the whole daggum thing out. And I'm thinking that, you know, they just burn through their print. Our students get a certain amount of money for the semester, they can add as they go, but I've seen students print, you know, an OER chemistry textbook out in color, jamming the printer up, and like, I'm like, you really should print this maybe in chapters, or maybe not print it at all for a while. Like, you know, so I always feel like the irony there is just too much
The irony
sometimes.
is strong, for sure.
But also sorry, go ahead.
I'm not sure that the question, do they prefer OER, do they prefer commercially published textbooks is really getting at the heart of it, because I don't think students care or really make that much of a note that there's a difference in these things. To them, they want to find all of their stuff in one place, and when they click on a link, they want the thing that they're supposed to read to be the thing that comes up immediately after that. So I think that we do find some resistance when we have them click on a link. It takes them to the library, they have to log in with their single sign-on, and then they're taken to an item description page, and then they have to find the full text page. Now, we do that for stability reasons, and we have our reasons, but from a student perspective, I think that is a barrier to being the ease of use. We do know that they care about cost, especially the generation of students that are just starting college are incredibly concerned about that. So I think there's definitely some room for them to weigh that. Although unfortunately, this isn't a conversation that we have the opportunity to have with students all that often. But I also wonder if part of the, I'm gonna take my OER textbook to the library and print the whole thing is a little bit bound up in some of our more traditional scholarship, ideas of how we should do academia and scholarship, because the idea is that you have one course and one textbook, and that textbook is printed, and I wonder if we've got some ideas we maybe need to stretch a little bit.
And one of the things the state of Georgia has done with the textbook transformation grants is that there have been some people who've put in proposals and won grants to do supplemental materials, to develop test banks for those OER textbooks, and homework assignments and things like that. And so it's interesting. They're not as fancy, they're not as flashy, but they get the job done. And so there've been faculty who've acknowledged this is a thing that we want because it helps with workflows and it helps with getting assignments and tests generated.
We had a question.
I was gonna say that we've had the experience where the faculty actually tell them to come to the library and print
Yeah,
this.
I've heard,
The students tell us, the faculty member sent us here to print all this.
Or they make these massive PDFs that have super high color images on them, and they tell them to print the PDFs before class, and then they're panicking because they're coming right before class, and printers remain one of the most difficult things in our libraries probably.
It's mind-boggling.
But the whole issue between print versus electronic is still a valid one that needs to be acknowledged, that some students will learn better and the material will sink in better if they're reading it off print versus electronic. So we're not being dismissive in any way.
Right, so I have no objection to
Yeah.
that, but when the faculty member tells them,
Oh, that's
you
not.
must go to the library, print this, and show me that you printed it, because like you said, half the students probably don't need that printed material,
Yeah.
and the faculty member is making them pay for.
Yeah, because then it's
Pay
no
for
longer
it.
no cost, because if a student gets allotted a certain, I know for our students, they essentially get per semester, they get 500 free prints for the semester. They can add all they want, but that, that's a
Ours get
textbook.
300. So these
That-
faculty
right there,
members
that's
are
a
chewing
textbook.
up their allotment.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily by telling them that they must. Now, I agree, we're running about half and half. Half of our students want print and half of our students want electronic.
Yeah.
And our collection right now is half and half.
Yeah, that's, we're about the same too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I have no objection if the students want to, but being told that they have to, right? And use their own money to do it.
That's talking about the easiest option. I'm taking classes through SNHU, and so I rented my textbook because I didn't want to buy it for this semester. And I was frustrated by the process of renting the textbook, downloading the software so that I could download it, and then having this digital rights managed ebook. I would have much rather had an OER, if only because I could just have the PDF, open it whatever I wanted, and then print what I wanted, as opposed to having to highlight in the software.
And that's so hard to explain to students. They're like, how come I have my Kindle and I can read whatever I want? And then the books from my classes and books I get through the library are so difficult to do. So we get that concern all the time for students.
Yeah.
Well, in OER, PDFs are not very dynamic either. I mean, are they doing anything with EPUB 3 or any other kind of formatting that's a little more fluid and dynamic?
I mean, part of the whole OER thing is that it's not consistent, but I think some people still.
I think that's an important issue. I had a professor come to me, eager to use an interactive textbook that some foundation had paid $60,000 for or whatever. and it was really cool, but it was hosted on iBooks. And so, well, we could download a version and then upload a PDF, but then you lose the interactive models and all the things that it's supposed to do. But the other option, you send your students to check out an iPad every day before they go to class, or I think there is that tension that either you have static content that can sort of be used anywhere, or dynamic content that's locked into some kind of platform, unless there's some place where that works better.
And I can't speak to that particular dynamic content, but when you say dynamic, it makes me wonder, how are we making sure that content is accessible and is going to be readable by screen readers as well as by visually? Did you want to?
I forgot what I was gonna say.
Sorry. I'm trying to give you more time to like gather yourself.
I know, I'm
It's intended
so
to be
bad.
nice.
Yeah, I know, thank you.
It looked like you wanted to talk about faculty, and I think in a sense, I'm also curious to know how much people have any anecdotes to share about engaging faculty and the question of affordability. How much are you finding that it's something that you're speaking to the converted, or you're really having to work to get them to engage with the question of affordability on their students' behalf?
I think faculty care about the cost of textbooks, but at the same time, you know, they view their textbook selection as part of their academic freedom. And so I've seen in other institutions when the department tries to implement that everybody uses this math book. You would think that they were demanding, like, you turn over your firstborn, and that you're encroaching on my territory and what's my responsibility to choose the best textbook for my students. But I think increasingly faculty are frustrated with instances where, you know, I can remember a student having to buy a chemistry textbook that was over $400. And she was only going to use it for a semester because she only needed Chem 1. She didn't need Chem 2 for whatever reason. Or maybe she needed Chem 2 and she'd taken Chem 1 somewhere else or something. But it was a textbook like, oh, well, we can justify this price because you're using it for 2 semesters. And, you know, and she's like, where am I supposed to come up with $500 extra because I barely can pay my tuition as it is, you know, so it's such a complicated, nuanced decision. And so every student has a unique scenario. And I think faculty are left feeling like they're responsible to fix a problem that they didn't create. And yeah.
In my experience, especially in Virginia, where we have Viva's working on has a, what I call it, a similar program to what you described with OER and like grants for faculty. That was actually really helpful because a lot of the pushback we got was like, yeah, I get that student affordability is an issue and we need to be thinking about this, but I think they felt like by pushing OER, we were underselling the work they had done to build their classes and to choose these textbook and students related to the academic freedom. But like, I chose this because it was good content, right? And so to redesign my curriculum around something else, even if I found a textbook that was good, is going to take me a lot of time and effort. And I don't like that this is just being written off like, you should do this over the summer and it's not going to be a big deal. So Viva having that grant system where they had OER kind of superstars, it's the wrong word for that program, but on each campus that could help guide faculty through that process, and the faculty could actually apply for and get grant money to subsidize the work that it took to implement OER in their courses. And I think that was very successful.
I think my time in collections and my OER people could say better, but my impression is that we're not really converting anybody, you know, kind of like politics. You're not going to flip from one side to the other just by kind of explaining it, but really we are getting a lot of wins from people that were already kind of doing it on their own and saying, I'm not going to make them pay for that, I'm going to find YouTube videos, I'm going to find whatever, and then we're just helping them with resources that maybe streamline that, I don't know. But that I think that is important because like kind of the diffusion of innovation curve, that we're not down here with come be an early adopter, it's more like we're here, you know, ride the wave with us with all those success stories. So I think that does lead to some kind of convincing of others when they see examples of how to change.
Well, for sure. They're gonna listen to their peers more than they're gonna listen to us, right? If they see some actual examples that are working on campus, I think that'll influence them much more than us.
The grants were for OER textbook reviews, so that's speaking to the quality piece. Like, we don't know if we can trust this information, so by putting the reviews out there and back into the space, it was helping them see that OER is you know, can be really high quality, but also sharing that information with other people.
Has yours, yeah, you have a question?
Well, I don't know a lot about this, I'm here to learn, not to express my experience, but my school does not, as a policy, purchase textbooks, but I was intrigued by what this lady said about Nova Southeastern University, and I'm wondering if any schools have, or if this is a naive question, if it's possible. We can't, for one thing, we can't afford to purchase the textbooks to put them on course reserve. Although the students, every day we get multiple students asking, do you have this book? And you know it's a textbook. And you know the student is trying to not have to buy the text. And once in a while serendipity happens and we happen to own the textbook or whatever. But I wonder if anyone else has experience with purchasing textbooks. I'm just coming from the perspective of saving students money.
Our tutoring center has an initiative where they buy some of the higher cost math and science, because those tend to be the culprits for the I think in my history classes when I was an undergrad many years ago, before anybody cared about textbook cost, I think my history textbook cost me like $70 or whatever, and I used it for this semester, and but the tutoring center purchases those and has the current editions, and students can check them out for they can only be checked out for like a 2-hour period. They can leave the tutoring center, but then at that point I see students coming and coming to the Book Eye scanner and capturing what because they're desperate. They want to learn. I was like, they're showing initiative that maybe it's not the best thing. They're acknowledging I'm complying with copyright because there's that screen that comes up, that's one thing our campus has done. Is the tutoring center has a budget to buy a very small collection of those higher cost textbooks.
Would it ever be a possibility to receive a grant to purchase textbooks, or that's probably the naive question?
No, I think different states and different organizations have, but then I think reserves make a lot of people nervous now,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to be guilty of infringing on,
Yeah,
someone
I remember
else's.
that case.
So, yeah,
And they're not transformative, really. They're not going to help bring down the price of textbooks
Sure.
necessarily.
No.
But, so there's a school in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin at Stout, I think, STOUT. They buy all the textbooks and put them on reserve for all the courses that are offered there. And there are other schools that do initiatives like that where they just target the most highly enrolled courses, maybe the top 50 or 100 or whatever they could afford to buy for. Or they get the list from the bookstore of the most expensive books being used, and they buy those and put them on reserves. So there's ways to be strategic about it without being comprehensive.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I just find it, besides the risk, the model itself just isn't very user-friendly. 2 hours, one student
True.
at a time. And, yeah.
One issue we've had when looking into possibly purchasing some textbooks, elective ones, is so many of them now have that online component for only one user.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Supplementals
So we
and stuff,
totally
yeah.
avoid those. It
Right.
depends, if
Or
it's
we-
supplemental,
Or we cover it.
yeah, if it's supplemental information, you might be able to still use the book, but if a huge part of it is based on the online component, we would
Yeah,
even
that's
consider
what I mean.
purchasing.
I use the word supplemental to mean that online
Yeah,
component.
it's
Yeah, and that's not
So
included.
many of them now.
Once that's registered with one person, it's gone, right? So.
And they just seem to go out of date so quick.
They do,
We're
yeah.
talking about buying them, but we just, we looked at all of that, we did a huge initiative, we worked with the bookstore, and, I would say like 50% of them would have to buy again the next year because they've changed the edition, so.
Yeah,
it just
the science textbooks
wasn't
typically
sustainable.
every 2 years, they, and it's like if you go and look at it, you think, what's different
Yeah,
here?
right.
Like you've moved this chart to that page and the
Change
page number and
numbers.
my husband teaches business law, and he told students he was using an older edition because he's like, there's no difference. And he just refused, but finally the bookstore was like, we can't carry that, edition anymore. They just refused to.
Oh, really?
And, because they're
How
like,
quickly
because it was
couldn't find
like,
it
it
to
was
buy.
like 2 editions back, but he was diligent in looking at the new copies, and he's like, there's no, so he ended up actually going to the online version of the textbook, but the particular publisher he selected allowed him to go through and say, these are the 10 chapters I'm actually gonna use, so students only have to buy those 10 chapters.
Oh, that helped.
But it took a lot of time and effort for him to figure out, how do I, because it was a textbook that he only does Business Law 1. They don't have
Right.
Business Law 2 in their curriculum. And he's like, I can't in good conscience force these students to purchase this textbook they'll only use for 1 semester. So, yeah.
We've had that same experience where we've actually moved from textbook, from bookstore content to library content. Because the bookstore couldn't get the older edition, and it was far cheaper for us to get that older edition, and there wasn't any new content in it,
Yeah.
so.
Nice.
So you bought a bulk of the textbooks of the older edition?
Yep, we did. We bought one with a multi-user license when we were in the course, and we actually have done that with several of our courses. So we ended up increasing our book budget, and we saved learners like $1.5 million.
Wow.
Which institution?
DePaul University, so we're online, so all of our learners are using online textbooks anyway. So it doesn't really matter to them whether they get it through the VitalSource platform or eBooks.com.
As long as they don't have to click too much.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a completely hypothetical, literally, can you put your hands up if you believe that in 10 years' time, campus bookstores will no longer be selling books? If you believe that that is true, can you put your hand up?
Any type of books or just textbooks?
Textbooks.
I think it'll take longer than that.
Students will always have to buy a copy of Frankenstein. I mean, you think about those courses, like the English and the history classes that they're not doing these giant textbooks. I can remember taking a lit class where I had to buy like 10 novels for the semester, and they were like $5-6 a piece. I'm sure now they'd be a lot more than that, but even in that capacity, like there's still I think they'll still want to hang on to that printed stuff.
Frankenstein's open source though.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that.
It is.
Specific criticism.
Yes, no, it's true. It's crazy how specific they get. No, you need to get the one that was published in 1962 and
Particular
was the- yeah.
publisher.
Yeah, I also think it depends on the discipline. Yeah. I think art tends to be more inclined to have print, with the exception of the some of the electronic visual folks, but with the advances in scanning and things like that, those two may eventually go online, but it's one of those things that, again, I think it'll also be the professor's call.
And they're all,
I'm saying, we find a lot of students want print. So even though we're being preferred and we're buying, they want to have that book. And it hasn't changed.
Especially in the health sciences, where they tab the pages and they
Yeah.
highlight and
Yeah.
go back and forth. Health sciences
And
and
even if
sciences
you,
in
if you,
general.
in the library, I can on many occasions think of instances where I've helped a student locate a specific ebook that they want to look at, and they're like, well, how much of this can I download it right now? And they're like, they want to know, like, that's not good enough that it's on the screen, because they want to go back and they want to mark it up. And so that, it's this kind of the battle between the screen and the page.
So my answer for you for that question is, I think it will take us, when we won't have print textbooks in bookstores, is as long as it takes us to figure out the cross between the Kindle Paperwhite doesn't hurt your eyes screen and Tony Stark's smartwatch. So.
That's a good
Yeah,
time frame for us to work
accessibility
on, right?
issues.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because, PDFs are great for visual impairments when the screen readers can read them.
And they're tagged correctly.
Yeah, but then you have the opposite problem of those people who cannot look at a computer screen for longer than 5 or 10 minutes. We also have our tutoring service for certain classes. They find it's easier to use the physical book to do the tutoring than try to utilize an electronic copy.
Yeah.
Math comes to mind.
Because I don't think we've figured out, the idea of turning a page is incredibly intuitive when you have the book in your hand, but I don't think it translates quite as well to a digital medium. So I think we need to figure out a way to do digital materials a little bit better in a way that is just moving through them and going back and highlighting is as easy as it is when you have the material in front of you.
Anybody go to the Open Ed conference last week? I didn't go either, but I was following along on Twitter, and it's sort of a depressing tweet that I saw about just sort of the power that commercial publishers hold and the resources they have behind them. And I probably get the details a little bit wrong, but it said something along the lines that it's taken 2 years for inclusive access to gain the amount of awareness and momentum that it's taken 15 years for OER to get. So I think that the commercial publishers, they're the ones that can invest in improving the user experience and making, the interacting with the e-texts more intuitive. They're the ones that have the resources to do that, right? So I think that's a big advantage that they have and a reason why they're harder to knock off, right? If we're thinking about this as knocking them, knocking those textbooks out of the classroom and replacing them with OER or with library resources, it's really hard to do when they have all the money behind them to invest in those sorts of things.
And we should do kids for scales for them.
Yeah, there you go. I see we're at the hour mark. But, one other thing that I heard about at the Open Ed conference last week when we were talking about OER is a lot of the focus tends to be up in maybe in the initial parts was about savings, affordability, and now the movement seems to be transitioning more towards equity and the access issue and like a social justice issue. And it's not just about saving students money. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that we need to remember as we're trying to sort of assess the success of these initiatives. It's not just about how much money we save for students. It's about how well were they taught. And so do we teach better with an OER than you do with a traditional textbook? Or does using library resources result in students staying in the course longer or getting better grades? And I know that's harder to get at, but something we should definitely prioritize and keep in mind as we're developing these products and assessing the use of them. So there is data out there about that, yeah.
I've seen a report.
It's really hard to prove though. So when I was at the University of Buffalo, we got a grant. So we thought we'll have same professor teaching the same class in the same semester, one with an OER and one with a commercial textbook. And even then, it was really hard to prove causation, because there's so many different factors that could result in the GPA of the students in one class versus the other. So,
in the other room, we were talking about the impact of student satisfaction with OER.
Maybe that's a better angle, yeah.
That 3.8 to 4.8 when OERs were used.
Oh, got you.
Yeah, they A/B tested as well. I thought that was interesting.
Nice.
I think you mentioned 70%. Was that from you? For you, the 70% of the library budget is around student paid for by the student
Oh, it's
fees?
funded by student fees at my campus.
That was really interesting. Is that similar in any other places?
Yeah, I've never seen any data about that. I don't know, do the fees students pay at your campuses support the library collections budget? Do you know?
Ours is about 20%.
20%? See, that seems more rational, right?
Now, when you say fees, you mean are you in addition to tuition?
No, so like the tech fee, for example, or when I worked at UB, it was a portion of the tech fee went to the library. All students pay when they enroll. Where I am now, it's called the comprehensive fee, and some of it goes to like the health center, some of it goes to IT, some of it goes to support printing and things like that, some of it goes to the library. And so students are paying for this stuff already, and I don't think they realize it, right? So anything we can do to raise awareness of that fact would be a good thing.
Right. Any other last thoughts, comments, questions from the group? Otherwise, it's back to the challenge of affordability wherever you are. Thanks very much for.
Yeah, thanks.